Good evening, and welcome to Soluble, America's Political Central. Today's date is February the 12th in the year of our Lord 2024. And as we've stated before, and we're going to be doing a constant reminder up until the month of November. We're in the thick of election season, and it is what it is. Now, tonight we want to briefly touch on the two most likely candidates who will be vying for the open seat occupying the Oval Office in November of this year. And those two leading candidates right now is the current sitting president incumbent Joseph R. Biden and former president Donald J. Trump, who served in the Oval Office from 2016 to 2020. Now, in looking at the two leading candidates, we're going to break this down into two different questions because one question fits each man. One question does not fit both men. And that question that we're going to study tonight when it comes to these two leading candidates and, being able to figure out which one is best for America, we're going to be dealing with for the love of country or for love of self. Now, these are the two candidates that we've spoken of. The current president, Joseph R. Biden, and the former president who is running to reoccupy the Oval Office in Donald J. Trump. For love of country or for love of self. You see the former president on the campaign trail, and nothing has changed. This is not a new and improved former President Trump. It's more of the same. In fact, he's possibly doubling down. For love of country or for love of self. We know that anyone who is aspiring or running to be president of the United States of America should have a deep and abiding love for the country that we call America. You should have a deep and abiding love, appreciation for the United States of America. And with that love of country, it would always trump love of self. It would always rise above love of self. And here's the two different candidates that we have thus far. And in an attempt to call balls and strikes as we see them, calling balls and strikes as we see them, we see in former President Donald J. Trump a love of self. And this is solely based on his actions, his character when in office, and right now while running to reoccupy the office. When we look at the current commander-in-chief, Joseph R. Biden, now, he's in his early 80s. Most people in this age category have retired, semi-retired. And if they're in the category where they're semi-retired, they're not, in most cases, they're not working because they have to. They're working because they want to keep from, their bones locking up even more at an even more rapid pace than what they're already doing. They're not content to just grow old gracefully. They want something to do. And so, you have in President Biden a man who is in a geriatric stage now. He's enduring age bashing. He's being attacked for his memory. Now, as Democrats, I stress that we should first and foremost, focus on the record. Is the president's age a concern? Of course. Of course it is. But in this democracy that we're under now, we have a system of checks and balances. And so while, the president is way past senior citizen, he's 80 years old, we have a vice president in place who is ready, willing, and able to back the president up should it be that anything happens. So as Democrats, we should, we should not, engage in this back and forth, to defend the president's age, to bait his, mental awareness. We shouldn't engage. We know, because we know for a fact that President Biden is in this for love of country. For love of country. I mean, think about it. He's 80 years old. And he's financially well off. He's financially well off. He's financially content. He doesn't have to be serving in the capacity of President of the United States of America. So one can only look at this and go to figure that it's for love of country. He's alarmed. He's petrified when it comes to the actions of his predecessor and what he's capable of turning America into, and his capability of setting the world on fire. So, there you have it. You have two different candidates, two different parties vying for the highest office in the land for two different reasons. And, this 90%, this 90 plus percentile of African-American voters who tend to sway Democrat. It's real important that you pay attention to what's going on. And this should be where we base our decision on who we're actually going to, pull that lever for come November the 4th. Who we're actually going to pull that lever for. Are we going to go for the candidate who has a deep, unyielding, unabiding love for country? Or are we going to make a mistake being persuaded by others, being discouraged by others from another party to vote for the candidate who has a love for self? And the country falls in line wherever he seems fit to put it, once he's satisfied his own ego. And, it may appear dangerous. That's because it is. That's because it is. For love of country or for love of self. This is the choice that is before us. Basically, come November, the former president is on the campaign trail right now. And, one would think that, the second time around, after being defeated in 2020 and stepping up for another shot at it, where he's never won the popular vote in the first election. He lost altogether in his re-election bid. So one would think that the former president would come back with a new and improved version of himself. But yet we have yet to see it. We don't recognize it. It's more of the same. Now here you have, on the Republican side, you have former Ambassador Haley fighting for and trying to defend the last vestiges of conservative political decency. And, we're not here to belittle the former ambassador because she is a woman. Throughout history, we've had countless times where women have been warriors, strong women in character, strong women in logical thinking. And we don't doubt that former ambassador is more than capable. Now, of course, we're staunchly Democrat here at Soluble. But the one thing that candidate Haley has going for her is that she has a deep love for country. She has a love for country. And out of all conservatives in the country, male and female, she is the last one standing to defend the principles of democracy and the republic as we know it from one of her own, from one of her own conservative colleagues, because she knows that this is a man, a former president, who has only a love for himself. Or first and foremost, we're not going to sit here and say altogether that former President Trump has no love for the country. We're not going to say that. But it's not showing on the campaign trail. It's the same old me, me, me. Now, he started out, as recognizing his opponent as former Ambassador Haley. He starts out bashing her, taking low blows, shots at her wardrobe, the type of dress she has on, calling her a bird brain. This is no way to treat an opponent on the campaign trail. And this is what, our children are having to see. Is this the example that we want? Obviously, from the Republican side, it's not a problem. But just think about this for a second. As bad as the former president has performed while in office, and conservatives on the right, they see this. Instead of standing up for the country, for democracy's sake, for the world leader that America is, they're doubling down on still right now trying to defend whatever the former president says. Now he's on the campaign trail, and as ludicrous as it sounds, as absurd as it sounds, he's on the campaign trail stating the fact that, he's willing to let NATO members, NATO countries come under attack, and willing to look the other way as Vladimir Putin does such. It endangers our standing in the world. It threatens, the start of World War III, which could possibly be a nuclear war. And what you should realize that we find alarming here at Soluble is that the former president has this mentality where, if there's a foreign country that doesn't agree, a foreign adversary, leader, military-wise, political, his stance is to take them out. Is to take them out. Peace through strength. This is what the former president is saying on the campaign trail. Peace through strength. And, we know from past histories that nothing can be further than the truth, especially when we're dealing with the region that is the Middle East. There's been guerrilla war. There's been, isolated cells like ISIS, Al-Qaeda that have sprung up, and these groups are still energized. They're still more determined than ever, and they have certain capabilities to strike Americans at home and abroad. And this is what you'll have or get when you're dealing with someone who has a love of self, who wants to put, his own self-interest, his own reputation ahead of what's best for the country. For love of self or for love of country. Now, this shouldn't be a hard choice. It shouldn't be a hard choice at all. But yet, we have Republican voters in the country who are, standing behind the former president no matter what. And he showed, very little to no character as a president of the United States. But here we are. And so our goal here at Soluble, as we've stated countless amount of times, is to solve, is to end political gridlock. Now, one of the best ways, as we've stated, is to get out the vote come this November. This is the first and foremost way, because we see what's going on with a slight majority in the House. We see what's going on with, the Republicans having the slight majority in the House. What's getting done? What's not getting done? The situation at the southern border is being prolonged with the Republican majority. So, is this a form of governing, or is this a form of stopping the governing process, interrupting of it, if you will, until, as our Republican colleagues see it and or say it, to wait till the next election cycle? And so, we know what's going to happen. Once they've lost again in November, they're ready to use this same strategy over and over again. We've had an election. We had an election in 2020. We've had an election in 2022. And so from then to now, from then, which is what the time was the former president lost, to now, nothing has changed. And to see actually where the country is going to go, this is why it's necessary more than ever to get out and rock this vote. Because, there's talks of secession. There's talks of civil war. There's talks of, the great replacement. And all of these are false narratives. These are talking points that are being, drubbed up by our Republican colleagues on the right and Republican voters in this country, simply because they know of no other way to win an election. They know of no other way. And so, as Democratic voters and common sense independents, we see what's at stake. We see what's at stake with the president's stance towards NATO. He stepped off into a place where, most veterans were frowned upon. Once again, he's mocking a veteran and his, duty to service, if you will. And the latest casualty is, former Ambassador Haley's husband. Is this a former president who has, the character and the personality and the intent of putting country over self? We think not. Most, if not all, of our commanders in chief, past and present, has unabiding respect for our military men and women who put themselves in harm's way on a daily basis to defend democracy at home and abroad. If this former president has a love of country, he would in no way, mock military veterans that are doing a service to the country. No way. And the former president seems out of touch, with saying, where is he? As if, he insists, or he wants, former Ambassador Haley's husband to be AWOL. It would better, it seems as if in the former president's eyes, it would be better for this serviceman who is doing his job, who is doing his, duty to service, which he's taken an oath of office to do, or oath of service to do. It seems as if the president former president would rather he go AWOL and be standing at the side of former Ambassador Haley while she's on the campaign trail. Now, while it would be great to have that level of support right there by our side, I'm pretty sure that former Ambassador Haley would agree that, her husband is doing what he's supposed to do. And he's where he should be at, while still supporting her from wherever he's at serving in the world. Now, this is actually the third time that the former president has, belittled the military, if you will, or seen, our military servicemen as of little or no significance. This is the third time. So it shouldn't be a head scratcher. It shouldn't take, the highest level of IQ to understand that this is what we're up against as Americans and as the Democratic Party and Democrats who, are patriotic, country loving Democrats in this country. This is the third time. First time it was the late Senator McCain. He mocked his military service in Vietnam. The second time was, over on foreign soil, of all places. We have military men and women who have died and have been buried on foreign soil during World War II. Former Chief of Staff Kelly, he knows. Former Chief of Staff John Kelly, he knows. Where the president refuses to go out and honor dead service members who's made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of their country. And he is the commander-in-chief. And this time here with former Ambassador Haley's husband is the latest event. It's the latest in a series of the former president constantly belittling, mocking the service, of our military veterans for love of country or for love of self. Now, we've never been here before. We've never been here before. You have a current commander-in-chief, and we make no bones about it. We don't try to cover for it. We're telling it like it is. He's 80 years old. And of course, he should be able to go into retirement. But because he loves his country so much, and the perceived threat that he thinks the former president poses to the country, that he doesn't want to get out. He doesn't know how to stop. It's for love of country that he's still in the race, because President Biden knows what kind of threat that former President Trump poses. And this is it, plain and simple. This is where our votes are, getting ready to be cast. One for love of country and one for love of self. And in a president, that should never be, for us as American citizens, something that is hard to figure out or something that is hard for us to make a decision on. For love of country or for love of self. We've never been here before. We're in uncharted waters. It's unprecedented, of course. But as we've said before here at Soluble, we thank the Almighty that former President Trump is the president of the Republican Party. And Joseph R. Biden is the president of the United States of America. The former president doesn't have a clue. He's dangerous. He's dangerous for the American way of life and for peace and stability around the world. He's a dangerous man. And, it's beyond comprehension, for those who are still supporting the former president. It's beyond comprehension, and it should be to people, any person of decency, regardless of political stripe, regardless of Democrat, Republican, or independent. Let it be recognized that we're here now dealing with a clear and present danger. Our purpose here at Soluble is to solve, is to end bipartisan gridlock up on the Hill and in Washington, D.C. altogether. It takes two to tango. And so, since our Republican colleagues are willing and determined to constantly be the party of no, then what other alternative do we have as patriotic, country-loving Democrats and common sense independents, but to summon our best voting attempt to get up the numbers in as large a capacities as we possibly can going into the November elections. Now, the constant knock, the one constant drum beat that you hear that, is raging against President Biden is his age, his memory. Now, out of sheer hypocrisy, you will never hear our colleagues on the right highlight the fact that former President Trump is having major slippage of the tongue also. He's having major verbal gaffes also. And out of sheer hypocrisy, they're covering for it. They're making excuses. But at the same time, when President Biden does the same thing on the same level or at the same pace, it's a big deal. He's unfit for office. He's unfit to serve. Regardless of the record, regardless of what he's got done since he's took the Oval Office in 2020. We're just approaching we haven't even got to 4 years yet, if you want to be technical about it. And President Biden has brought America back from a long ways, from the throes and depths of a pandemic, dealing with inflation, broken supply chains. Climate change is wreaking havoc on our environment, on farmers' ability to produce higher crop yields. And what has the president done since he entered the Oval Office? Nothing but roll up his sleeves and get to work. For love of country or for love of self. Now, this is not, our grandfather's election, our grandmother's election. This is not an election that, is made for our future grandchildren. This election is right here and now. This election is right here and now. And if we don't play our part and make the intelligent decision here to show up first and foremost, and here's where I go back to that 90-something plus percentile of African American voters who are strictly in Democrat corners. You see it. It's right here before you. Now, if you think that it's not that easy of a choice and it's deeper than what we're stating here at Soluble, we welcome you to come on. We welcome you to come on and, give us your feedback. Give us your take on what you see happening on the campaign trail. What you currently see happening right here and now. The former president, for love of self or for love of country. You don't take a bipartisan bill coming out of the Senate for something that as nagging and has been a thorn in the side of America for so long as it relates to the southern border. This is what our Republican colleagues are telling us. That the southern border is a threat to national security. And you have the former president, for love of country or for love of self, tanking sound legislation, sound bipartisan legislation that can be passed into law that will greatly improve the situation on the southern border. Does this sound like, the actions of a former president who loves his country? Regardless of who is in the Oval Office, whether it's Democrat or Republican, we should be wanting to do the right thing for the continental borders of the United States of America, regardless of who is in office. For love of country or for love of self. Of course, President Biden is, as we've stated, and we're not going to hide it, he's in his early 80s. He's financially set. He's not destitute for money. He's not on some kind of a power trip, some kind of a power craze. We have a former current commander-in-chief who And the news media doesn't state it enough. The news media doesn't state it enough. So we're going to shout it from the holiest of highest hills on a regular basis. The current commander in chief, Joseph R. Biden, is in it for love of country. And if you can recall, just 4 short years ago, the whole country was calling on this man, who was content to be retired. Of course, he ran for president and never got elected. A powerful man in the Senate for so long. Ended up being the vice president of the United States. And so, we have to understand, did President Biden come out seeking, think back in 2016, anywhere from 2017 to 2019, did we see the current commander in chief, Joseph R. Biden, did we see him constantly jockeying for a position on a TV screen to the news media to say, I want to be president. I want to run for president, out of something like an ego trip, or like he was power hungry. The country hounded this man. He couldn't get up in the morning and have a cup of coffee, and enjoy a private conversation with his wife without the press standing around, wanting to get a statement. Is he going to run? Why? Because, just those 4 short years ago, he was the only man. And this was a thought that was shared by Democrats and Republicans alike. He was the only man that could defeat former President Trump. And they hounded him. They begged him. They harassed him. And now here we are, some 4 years later, and it's like, what have you done for me lately? And the current commander in chief is constantly getting things done. For the vast majority of us, and it's us here at Soluble included, we see what's going on in the Middle East. We also see the commander in chief acknowledging that Israel's over the top. We need a 2-state solution. This is something that pretty much every commander in chief has pushed for, has advocated for. Would we get this same level of support for a 2-state solution in the Middle East in dealing with former President Trump? Because the former president is constantly ego tripping. If America is going right, he wants to go left. Simply to be able to say, see how I went left and how I'm better than everybody else. No one wanted to go left but me. Regardless of whether it's best for America to go left. You've never seen a president of the United States. You've never seen a sitting president of the United States have such a fond admiration for dictators. When was the last time you've seen a sitting president of the United States of America visit the country of North Korea? Because their values are totally contradictory to the values that we have here in America. But there you have the former president, for love of self, to be able to say, Trump did it. I did it. Whether it was good for America or not, I did it. And so therefore, there's another notch on my gun belt. They say, see what I did. By visiting this country, where people are starving, thrown in jail, beaten and killed. For love of country or for love of self. This is where we're at. We can look at all of the policy issues, all of the issues that we face here in the country. And moving forward into this next century. How, Republican voters in the country have, fallen this low is, for whatever reason that they believe the former president is the better of the two men to serve as president of the United States of America. But as Democrats, this one, if we sit this election out, it's going to be the most consequential absence that has ever been taken in a federal election, because it's going to begin to take America backwards and cause us to lose our standing in the world. I mean, all of Europe right now is, scratching their heads. They're confused as far as to what is going on with the things that are coming out of the former president's mouth. Because never in the history of the country have we taken the side of a dictator versus the side of NATO countries who want to advance their countries along into the future with free and fair elections. We've never taken the side of defense of a dictator. Now, are we prepared to face a new normal in this country? Or better yet, a new abnormal? Because that's what we'll be getting with the former president and the positions that he seemed to be taking. A new abnormal where, the Department of Justice is weaponized to go after political opponents. We've never done this before in the history of the country. And this is what the former president is ready to do. This is what he's prepared to do as soon as he enters the Oval Office. So here are our choices. Here are our choices between the two men. And when it comes to President Biden's age, his vitality, as some of, our leading political minds around the country have said, what about the level of experience here? Because things are getting done. And our Republican colleagues, they know this. So they can only make a personal attack. It's a personal attack. And we have to have, a forward-thinking vision to be able to see that they can only attack us, on our political views from a personal level. Hillary Clinton and her emails. There have more been found. No charges never pressed. And the Republicans were content with it. They were content with the fact that the accusation was made. It damaged former Senator Clinton politically. It cost her votes, and it cost her the Oval Office. And they were content. And you have a president and former President Trump going on and on and on with his illegal activities. Doing things with classified documents and trying to cover it up, asking people to lie. And there's nothing. It's almost like it's celebrated. But as the former president pushes the envelope further and further and further, then the Justice Department has to act, because no one is above the law. And now all of a sudden, when they're acting and or reacting based on what the former president is doing, now it's a two-tier system, because Hillary Clinton wasn't charged. When, upon the former president entering the Oval Office in 2016, they had the Senate. They had the House. They had the FBI director. They had everyone in place to press charges against former Senator Clinton. But they knew, regardless of whether the American people knew or not, they knew that there was no there. There's no evidence. There's an accusation, but there's no evidence. And this is furthermore a reason that, we get out and rock the vote in November. Because this is currently, the way that, for reasons that we don't understand, our Republican colleagues are trying to undermine the system. They're still specializing in accusations, which is fine. But back it up with evidence, which is the right thing to do. But we have nothing. We have nothing. And so, it shouldn't really be a competition to my fellow Democrats. We know that a lot of Republicans are going to sit this election out. They're either going to vote for Mickey Mouse or Big Bird or something like that. We do not expect them to cross over the aisles and vote for President Biden. But sitting it out or voting for Mickey Mouse or Big Bird, that's a win for us. But it also should be an eye-opener because you never in the history of the party had a candidate that maybe half of Republicans don't even support. So this should be more of a wake-up call as to why would we as Democrats cross the aisle or have question marks in our mind considering our guy. This is our guy, even if he's 80 years old. Right now, for the sake of what's best for the country, for democracy, and the republic itself, a fumbling, bumbling, stumbling Joe Biden is better than an upright walking former President Trump who is rarely stumbling. That sounds crazy. You say, how could it be? One of these men knows how to keep democracy on balance. That means dealing with problems here at home and things that are foreign affairs. Being able to sit around a table of advisors and listen, which is one of the qualities of a good leader. Ones who listens to his subordinates, to his advisors. That's what they are there for. You haven't heard anyone in the Biden administration, any whistleblower, come forward and say that, the current commander-in-chief, Joseph R. Biden, doesn't even want to read his daily intelligence reports, his daily intelligence briefing. So it should be a sigh of relief to the country and to all of us as Americans. It should be a sigh of relief that, we have a commander-in-chief where, we don't have to, insert flattering things about him inside of an intelligence briefing in order to get him to become engaged and interested in reading, what threats might be out there for the country and us as citizens in America. This is what we were dealing with former President Donald J. Trump, a former president who doesn't want to even read his daily intelligence briefings. How does that work for love of country? Someone help us understand here at Soluble. How does this work for love of country? And the list goes on and on and on. As I said, former Chief of Staff John Kelly, he knows. He knows how the president really feels about America's service veterans. Those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. We've never seen this before in the history of the country. And, because the former president is ready to go rogue at the drop of a dime, bomb a country, start a war, look the other way while war is started. He can do no wrong. We have to get out and vote, this truly disturbing individual who is aspiring to be president of the United States once again. We have to shut him down. We the people. And we understand. We believe that our listeners know this. We believe and understand that our listeners know this. We're our purpose here at Saw is to come on as a constant reminder, trying to point out the things that maybe you're missing, maybe you don't see it, and in just in case that is the case, we're here telling it like it is. We're not shying away from the camera. We're not looking down at papers, to read what we've written down. Everything is coming from the heart, for love of country or for love of self. This is the choice that we have in the two candidates leading up to the elections of November. And the former president hasn't demonstrated that he, you know, can show it. He can produce it. Can he even fake it? And this is what makes, former Ambassador Haley such a breath of fresh air. Because even though we don't agree with conservative policies that, the Republican Party wants to use to govern the country, former Ambassador Haley has a love for her country. She has a love for her country. And if you're listening, paying close attention, she's going to let you know, before she drops out of the race or before she's forced to exit because of lack of finances, not enough delegates. Before that happens, she's revealing to you how dangerous, the former president is. When you love your country and, you're running for the highest office in the land with, a duty towards service and you love your country, you don't play fast and loose with classified materials. You don't mock America's service veterans. You don't go to rogue dictator countries that have beliefs when it comes to human rights and forms of government that are totally opposite of the values that we share here in America. When you love country more than self, you don't do these things. And so, right now, our current commander-in-chief is constantly under attack. And, it's a new low because there's nothing about his policy. So that tells you that should tell us as Democrats that he's moving the country along in the right direction. He's not being attacked on policy and policy positions. If you're really paying attention to what's going on, this time last year, February of 2023, this time last year, you had our colleagues on the right hoping, wishing, wanting a major inflation catastrophe to happen here in the United States of America. Wanting it to happen, hoping that it would happen. But it hasn't. Why? Because the current commander-in-chief, who has an unabiding love for country, went to work, day and night, working with his advisors, listening to economic experts on what it was going to take to decrease the chances of us dealing with a major inflation setback. For love of country, he did this. Came out of retirement, stays up late at night, jet setting around the world for the sake of world peace and America's standing in the world. For love of country. For love of country. He's taking it on the chin. He's taking the shots, that are coming from the other side of the political arena. And he's kept his head up, kept his chin up, and steadily moved America forward. There is no inflation because of the performance of the current commander-in-chief. And so what do our colleagues on the right have to run on? what are their policy positions that are better than what we have now? Because that's what we have to get back to. As we stated before, there was a time where there was a Democrat in office and you had a Republican who wanted to be the next one in line or to unseat that Democrat that was in office, who came up with a better idea, while at the same time acknowledging that what the current Democrat who may have been in power, what he was doing was good for the country, but he has something better. And this is how far, that the Republican Party of today has fallen. What is better? What is better? If the current commander-in-chief, Joseph R. Biden's idea for the border, this bipartisan solution that was debated in the Senate, if it's good for America, then let it become the law of the land. And while at the same time, as Republicans who want to be the next in charge, showing us what you got that's even better. But we can't get there. We can't get there because the party is in disarray. It can't rebrand itself. It can't seem to remake itself in the face of a changing American demographic. So this is what it does. It goes on the attack. From accounts of most legal minds in this country, having to do with lawyers, legal experts, some of the things that came out in the report dealing with President Biden's handling of classified materials, based on what we've heard from most legal experts, they're using the word gratuitous. Gratuitous. And so we went to the Webster Dictionary to get an idea of what was going on here. And this word is simply meaning that, it had nothing to do with what should have been in the report. It was totally irrelevant. It had nothing to do with it. And then later we find out that, this report was written by a Republican in the Department of Justice or what have you. Now, this should tell us two things as far as us being the bigger party. The commander-in-chief has the power to shake up the FBI, the Department of Justice. He has the power to hire and fire there. But he's left this Republican lawyer in place. He's left the Director Wray, in place. Because President Biden has no political bias, when it comes to Republicans and Democrats. He's looking at a person's ability to serve in the capacity of the office that they're holding. What's their commitment to America? What's their level of integrity to serve in this capacity? And so this is why this Republican lawyer was there to write this, totally gratuitous, based on legal experts, information in the report. This just says a lot about, a man and, whether he loves himself or whether he loves his country. President Biden doesn't look at, even right now, the president doesn't look at the person who wrote this, legal summary based on his handling of the classified information. He doesn't look at him as an enemy. He doesn't look at him as someone who should be fired. He's not name calling the guy. He's not name calling him. He's not trying to put his address on social media so he can become, a target for attack by Democratic voters. So if, President Biden can rise up in defense of the country and show that, he has an unyielding love for the country. And this is what, stems his desire to seek another 4 years. It's for love of country. This is what the United States of America means to this man. It's very near and dear to him. He's demonstrated this passionate love for the country in the Senate. for nearly 40 years. He's demonstrated his passion for the country in the capacity of vice president. And now here he is, holding the highest office in the land, trying to bring America back from the brink of what it was pushed to by his predecessor. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. It's for love of country that he's doing it. Who would take these kind of shots and attacks on their age, attacks on their mental capability, if he didn't have a love for country here? Dealing with, the ridicule, the negative statements, the mockery, the attacks on his age, the attacks on his son, Hunter. Who deals with these things and keep going if they don't have a love for country? President Biden right now, he understands the historical importance of the presidency of the United States. He knows where the country has come from, where it's been, and where it's trying to go. President Biden has a complete understanding of that and fairness for all. This is what we're trying to work towards, even to this day, in the year of our Lord 2024. And America was established as a country in the year 1776. And so this is what the commander-in-chief is doing, trying to bring us back from the brink, and while at the same time keeping us moving forward as a functioning democracy and a world leader for human decency, respect for others, the rule of law, fairness in government, the people's voices matter. This is what the president is defending and trying to bring America back from the brink of. And this is where the former commander-in-chief, President Donald J. Trump, wants to take us back to that place. So, as Democrat voters and common sense independents, we have to look at where we were before this last election, before Joseph R. Biden took over and brought us back from the brink. Do we want to go back to a time of civil unrest? Do we want to go back to a time of alt-right, white supremacy violence? Do we want to go back to a time where we have a president serving in a totally broken administration and nothing is sacred? You have access to all kinds of documents and files, and you don't even have the proper security clearances. This is the decision that we have to make. We have two men vying for the highest office in the land. And you have to make that decision as to which person lines up more with a desire to run because of a love for country versus having a desire to run because of love of self. You have to make that decision, not based on what we're saying here at Soluble. We're here to point it out, but it's your decision to make, because just like, us here at Soluble, you're seeing it yourself. You're seeing it yourself. It's nothing new and improved. And this is what should be alarming to us as Democratic voters and common sense independents. The former president doesn't seem to have enough of an intelligence level to understand that he never won the popular vote. He lost his re-election bid, and he needs to do something different to be able to win a majority. Right now, the former president is saying that the election is a witch hunt. The system is rigged, while at the same time not trying to make the case to win over new voters. Will the president, come a different way for love of country and come with a different message so that he just may attract some of the Swifties. Some of Taylor Swift's followers may just be willing, if the former president was to show a love for country versus a love for self, they may cross over and decide to vote for the former president in November. But instead of, and this is the Republican Party in a nutshell, instead of trying to reshape the message, repackage the message, if you will, and give it to the Swifties in a different way, they're attacking Taylor Swift. She's under attack. What kind of a democracy does that? What kind of a party and our president who loves country versus love of himself? It would go on the attack from the American voter towards the American voter that he needs in order to win an election. So this should be a very alarming. And it should speak more truth to power to the fact that the former president really doesn't know what's going on. I mean, think about it. In closing, think about it. For love of self or for love of country. And you have the former president running again for the Oval Office. And he hasn't tried to remake himself. This is not a new and improved former President Donald J. Trump. It's the same old, same old. And the former president, while we talk about mental ability, while we're stressing mental ability of both men, the former president is showing how deeply diminished that he is, because he doesn't seem to realize that, he's already in the minority. And in order to win the Oval Office, he needs to gain the majority. But his actions currently at the moment, he's doing nothing. He's doing nothing to win over a majority. He's doing nothing to make the American people pause and say, well, wait a minute. It's something different now than it was 4 years ago, than it was 8 years ago. It's something different. He doesn't have it. He doesn't have the intellect to realize that he's in the minority and he needs to try to gain a majority. Why? Our position here at Soluble is that the former president is ready in whatever way that he can to try to seize power by force. This is the only logical conclusion that we can come to when he's on the campaign trail and doing little to nothing to win a majority, and he's already in the minority. One can only conclude that, and especially what we saw after the last election and what we witnessed on January 6th of 2021. If the former president doesn't have the intellect, the care, the wherewithal to win over a new majority when he's already in the minority, one can only conclude that he's thinking about a second time around of trying to seize power by force. And this is totally out of lockstep, with what the American system of democracy stands for and how it operates. We are a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And here we have a former president, and you ask yourself, for love of self or for love of country, who is running for the highest office in the land, and he's not trying to win over the vast majority of the voting populace of America. Because if he was, he would come new and improved. He would come with something different that would make, as I said, the American people pause to say, it's different now. The former president is doing things different and in a better way. But we don't see it because it's a love for self and not love of country. So regardless of what we mostly see coming out of Republican circles, as far as the current commander-in-chief, Joseph R. Biden's age and his mental ability. Let's look first and foremost at what's getting done. Is the country moving forward economically? Is the country moving forward as far as prescription drug prices being lowered, women's rights to make their own medical decisions? Is the country moving forward as far as climate change and what we should be doing to try to reduce CO2 emissions going into the atmosphere every day? And if you could check the box, yes, for each and every one of those questions and more just like them, is there still plenty of work to be done? Of course it is. And this is why President Biden is aiming for another 4 years, because in his heart of hearts, he still feels like there's a little bit more that he has to get done in order to make America more and more like that shiny city on a hill that any leader of the country should be aspiring to make it. Anyone who is vying for the Oval Office should be trying to make America a better place, as a country and for all of the citizens that live here. And so, in closing, we would ask, those who have been listening tonight to take this into consideration. When you're talking to family and friends, leading up to this November, we have, holidays where we'll be getting together, where we'll be celebrating, where we'll be congregating. And these are the conversations that we should be having. The former president, and we say this regrettably. We don't say this with political biasness. But the former president is an embarrassment to the Oval Office. And, those voters in America who are staunchly in his corner, they're going to have to answer for that stance that they took on the wrong side of history. If the president is doing something new and improved, if he's doing something different that we feel like would be great for America, we're going to acknowledge it. Because regardless of the fact that we're staunchly in Democratic corners, if the Republicans have something that we feel like is better, we have to voice it. We have to bring it to the forefront. We will be less than honest brokering Americans in service of what's best for the country if we didn't bring it up. But we don't see those great ideas. We see attacks. We see false accusations. We see investigations to nowhere. And so you have to ask yourself, as Democrat and common sense independent voters in this country, why is it that our Republican politicians and Republican voters can't simply challenge President Joe Biden on his record? Inflation is being tamed. We have domestic tranquility. The economy is moving in the right direction. We're getting the job reports on a monthly basis where there's growth. The economic assessment, coming out of the ending of the calendar year 2023 showed that America, even if it was slow, even if it wasn't, a big jump, that the economy was constantly growing. The GDP reflected that we were constantly on a path of growth, slowly but surely. So if it's not broke, why would we try to fix it? If we showed up in large numbers in 2020 to get rid of a former president who was a constitutional threat, a constitutional menace, then how can we sit on the sidelines now and let him retake the Oval Office when it's more of the same? Who jumps out of the frying pan into the fire? Who does that? And so, to my fellow Democrats and common sense independent, especially that 90-something plus percentile, this is the question that we're leaving you with tonight. we have two men who are running for the highest office in the land. And we have a situation where, we should look at it as, do we want to choose a candidate who has a love for the country? Or do we want to choose a candidate who has a love for himself? That is what the decision is going to come down to. I mean, we've looked at, the former president's policy positions. We're going to take into account, whatever the good things that he did in the 4 years that he was in office. But all of those things fade away in comparison to the very threat that he is to democracy. To the very threat that he is to democracy. The corruption is unhinged. The attacks and the undermining of our institutions is rampant simply because the former president can't get away with it. And this is not someone who wants to be the leader of the most powerful nation in the world. And that same person has the utmost respect and the unabiding love for that country that he wants to lead. The president doesn't demonstrate it in his actions. We don't see it in his character. We see him more mocking what it takes to be in the Oval Office and have the necessary character to be presidential. We see him mocking it. So that's the question that we're going to leave you with. For love of self or for love of country? And which of these two men best represent love of country versus love of self? That's the decision that you're going to make. Stay observant. We have a long ways to go. Pay attention to former Ambassador Haley. She's revealing more and more who her conservative fellow Republican is, based on what he's just said about NATO and allowing these countries to be attacked. You have former Ambassador Haley say it made her sick to her stomach. And so when we see a fellow Republican saying this about another fellow Republican on the campaign trail, it's something to be taken very seriously. So in closing, there you have it. And it is for you to make your mind up. But know that, one of these men can lead America forward to a place of peace and prosperity in the world, and he will make every attempt to lead us in that direction. And one of these candidates is very volatile, and we don't know what we're going to get from day to day. Whether it's going to be world peace or world war, we're not sure. And so we have a decision to make. Voter beware. Our goal here at Soluble is to keep bringing the facts, keep bringing information that makes you more and more aware of what's at stake and the importance of, forming this blue wave leading up to the election in November for 2024 and the next president of the United States of America. This is Soluble signing off. We thank you for joining us tonight on this segment of For Love of Country or Love of Self. We hope that it's been informing and eye-opening, and we're encouraging you to, keep the conversation going because democracy is at stake, and our very livelihoods are at stake in this crucial election coming up in 2024. So until the next time, this is Soluble signing off. We thank you for joining us as always. Until we meet again, this is Soluble signing off. Good night and God bless. Thank you.